Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
October 16, 2020. The corruption still exists at Wells Fargo edition. And we begin with that story from Jack Kelly, writing in Forbes that Wells Fargo has fired over 100 employees for allegedly lying to obtain loans intended for small businesses. The loans were made under the federal government's PPP program, which was part of the CARES Act stimulus package. Wells Fargo Chief Human Resources Officer said, "We have terminated the employment of individuals and fully cooperate with law enforcement." So it looks like another glaring lack of compliance and supervision by Wells Fargo. You just have to wonder how corrupt the culture is there and whether it can ever be fixed. Next up, I want to work retail over Christmas. Well, one thing you may receive is training on how to manage conflicts with Covidiots, typically Trump supporters, who resist mask wearing, social distancing, and store capacity limits. Such Covidiots obviously put the entire workplace at risk, but they also can really ramp up and cause violence. And so companies need to focus on reducing workplace violence. And in the retail sector, that's not typically something we've seen. So one of the major scenarios is employees having to ask a customer to wear a mask. And of course, the Trump Magna hat-wearing Covidiot refuses to and then goes ballistic. So if you're going retail, you may get some new training. From the Wall Street Journal, a Houston software executive was charged Thursday with hiding approximately $2 billion in income from U.S. tax authorities over the past 20 years in what officials said was the largest criminal case ever against a person accused of evading taxes. Robert Brockman, chief executive of Reynolds & Reynolds, was indicted on charges including tax evasion, failure to disclose assets held overseas, and wire fraud. He's a sole investor in the first-party private equity fund managed by Vista Equity Partners. So pretty significant, obviously, tax case brought by the IRS. We haven't seen them do this very much, but it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And finally, Trump's attacks on diversity and inclusion have really riled up the business community with more than 150 businesses and nonprofits, including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, asking President Trump to withdraw his executive order that puts a limit on diversity training. The group said that the order creates confusion, leads to unnecessary investigations, and hinders employees from combating workplace discrimination. The group said the order is already having a broadly chilling effect on legitimate diversity training. Its ambiguity could lead to unwarranted complaints and investigations. Of course, companies that pull their training do run the risk of EEOC claims. And obviously the next step for Trump would be to actively engage in discrimination. Or as Senator Lindsey Graham said today, let's go back to the good old days of segregation. So when the U.S. Chamber of Commerce speaks for the business community, it's obviously of a topic of importance. And this is something very near and dear, because if businesses can't hire diversely, there will be no businesses in America. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.